All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hopefully, we're getting good audio here in the vehicle. We are on our way, headed up to good old little tiny itty bitty town of Pelston that has a tiny little regional airport. And I am on my way to the Big Apple. That's right, flying into Newark, and we are hopping on a boat just behind the old Statue of Liberty, headed out for a 3 day, well, 2.5 day, I suppose, training sesh. It's going to be awesome. 43 footer. And yeah, it's going to be an absolute blast. The weather looks good. I will admit, trying to plan when we were planning this back in, I think, early August, it was one of those things where we wanted to squeeze it in. We knew the risks of trying to plan something during the hurricane season, but essentially it looks like we are about 4 days earlier than these systems are going to be taking over, which is good. I think our biggest battle is going to be trying to find the wind, not so much having too much of it. And I don't know, sometimes that could be almost equally as frustrating, but at least, hey, at least it's not a hurricane. 100%. And I definitely, hopefully, all those southern states, when this next system rolls up and cuddles up into Savannah and Jacksonville and Buford, Charleston, all those poor places. Hopefully they weather this and it's not too bad of a system, but joy, it is. It's it's frightening to see that, the two systems sort of right next to each other pushing in, because I don't know, I always see that and I'm like, dude, what if they join together? And it becomes one of those sort of perfect storm situations. But anyway, we don't have to worry about that. By the time I'm flying back here to Michigan, it's essentially going to be still a couple of days out. So, like I said, we should have a decent little breeze, I'm hoping. And yeah, that's sort of the game plan. But essentially, what about, you might ask, like, what is this exactly that you're doing? Bare bones, it's essentially a training session curated for each individual boat owner. So let's just say you've got a boat and you've had it for years and you've always wanted to do like offshore work, but you really aren't comfortable going out and doing that, but you want to gain the experience so that you can, with comfort and with confidence, head offshore and, sail to some destination you've wanted to, or whatever. Well, essentially what I can do is hop on a plane and come on out, and essentially we'll go through it all, and we'll go through the checklist on the boat. We'll take off and essentially try and gain that experience, because I mean, when it comes down to it, all these things on sailboats are always going to just be about gaining confidence through experience. That's the ultimate way that we're ever going to, and not just on boats, but in life. It always feels a bit uneasy to take off and do something that you've never done before, something that's foreign to us, uncharted waters and all that sort of stuff. And it really, if you can have somebody who can help sort of navigate the hurdles and be able to sort of answer the questions and this, that, and the other thing, well, hey, why not? I mean, it's just going to expedite and fast track your ability to get to that spot that you're looking to get to. And that, I'm just using the offshore thing as one example, but in the past we've done everything from boat handling and docking skills. That's another situation that sort of comes up, is sometimes people jump in and they get these boats and then they either have a bad experience or they essentially they're just nervous. You get on that boat and you're like, your heart's racing. You're like, oh my gosh, this is way more than I bargained for. And that's one of those things where, again, that's where it's more not just having someone there to sort of help, but really that's where it takes on more of the instructional side of, okay, so we're going to create like a 3 or a 4 day lesson plan where Okay, we're gonna work on the very basics. We're gonna go through all the boat handling, docking. We're just gonna grind. We're gonna do it over and over and over again until you say like, "Ah, all right, that's the last one. I'm sunburnt. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore." That's that's the Jerome stamp right there. Is that if you're willing to keep going, I'm definitely ready to keep going. I love doing all this sort of stuff where you're docking and you're boat handling, you're trying to kinda gain that seamanship sort of experience, and, God, it is a blast. I shout out to Mark and Steph because they definitely there were a lot of days where we had been basically grinding away all day, day after day, and I'm just like, "Oh, do you say we do some more?" And they're like, "You know what? Let's call it tonight. What do you what do you say? It's 6:30 PM, hungry, and let's do it." And they did an absolute fantastic job, and, like, the proof is in the pudding after that, because then they, within just months, they're out there having their own adventures and going after what they wanted to do and doing it with confidence. I mean, that's the real key. So that's that's kinda another aspect of it really, but yeah, essentially, love hopping on a plane and going anywhere to do something like this. I mean, I feel like it's an absolute privilege that people will trust me to do this and pay the money that it costs to do something like this and all because it's not just what I charge, it's also the expenses of the travel and everything like that. So I know it definitely adds up, but I do really think that, 3 to 5 days and all of a sudden you've got this whole new confidence and this whole new level of experience to go forward with that boat because, you essentially you learn something like that, and now if you're feeling like, "Oh, dude, I totally got this. I no longer have to worry about docking this thing in this river on this crazy slip. I have to I can think about the trip that I want to do and the day sail and this, that, and the other thing. And it seems to be something that really does help out quite a bit. And then we've got even bigger stuff where we actually do full on passages. And that is a bit more involved for sure. I ask of my clients to always sort of write out a goals sheet, essentially just a bullet point list of things that they want to work on, things they are unsure about, things they want to gain more experience or confidence in. And that just allows us to sort of point the arrow directly at our goals and use our time as efficiently as possible because obviously we are a little bit and the whim of Mother Nature in this respect. And not every day is a perfect sailing day. And so I like to kind of break down what we want to work on, what the clients want to work on, and then just accordingly, as that date gets closer and closer, we look at the weather. We try our best to, sometimes we want to go through the boat systems and do a full systems check and everything from the propane to the water to the electricity. And I am not an expert in all of those things, but what I am pretty good at is figuring out how you troubleshoot and how you actually trace all these systems, and then also doing the research to find the information that you're looking for, whether it's resources like Nigel Calder or if it's, YouTube. YouTube has an insane amount of great information that as long as you know the keywords to put in and the things to look for, then you can find all those resources and anybody can do it. That's kind of the best part. So, but yeah, I mean, once we've got our sort of our goal sheet and everything and the weather's good, and then we just tag it in and we just go for it. And sometimes these are like out and backs where we do 24 hours a day, couple of days out at sea and just try and gain the overnight experience. Sometimes it's just day sailing and, we're either sleeping on a boat or we're sleeping in a motel or something like that. And oh, that coffee's good and strong. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a really interesting experience to do this stuff, and it's been a lot of fun to just share some of the knowledge and the experiences that I've had over all these years. But yeah, with the passage planning, that one, like I said, is definitely a bit more involved because we've got to do some pre-prep work. It's quite a few little conference calls and video calls and stuff like that beforehand. Usually, that's also going to necessitate at this point kind of a quick visit to the boat first and foremost because I it's not that I don't trust people at all, and to this day we've had just great experiences with everybody. But if we're going to go offshore, let's say somebody wants to do a trip down to the Virgin Islands from the East Coast somewhere, let's say Charleston, you know, if I show up and then, doing my normal little survey, quote unquote survey, and find things that I'm not comfortable with for heading offshore, well, then, we're not going. We're either going to fix it and make it so that it is proper, or we're essentially, it's going to be like, dude, we don't have enough time to do this and do the trip. And so we kind of have to pull the cord. So to mitigate that from happening, at this point, I'd like to kind of get to know the boat just a little bit beforehand, even if it's just a quick visit, walk through and be like, oh, yeah, okay, that boat is super solid. I think we're going to be just fine. Because, obviously things can happen when you're out at sea and they're bound to happen and breakages and all that sort of stuff. But you want to make sure you're starting with your best foot forward, if that's how the saying goes. I think it is. But yeah, and then, those the other tricky part with that type of passage is really trying to also land ourselves on a pretty good weather window, which again is not always the easiest thing. And sometimes it's going to necessitate a little bit of a wiggle room on one side or the other, which is something I always try to really work into the schedule to make it as flexible as possible. And thankfully, my life and the fact that I have Sparrow and Sparrow demands a lot of attention and a lot of work, it makes it seems to work out okay. Like for instance, in October, we have a trip that we've sort of penciled in for the second half to third week of October, and that's our little realm. And so essentially, as soon as I'm all wrapped up by mid October, I'm going to head out to Sparrow up in Maine where, I can work on the boat. We can look at the weather every day. And once things look good and we see a nice little window, boom, I hop on a plane. I'm down there to Baltimore and we are out of there within 2 days, essentially. And that makes it super easy so that we can be flexible because my goal really is I'd like to give every sailor, every client a really well-rounded experience. We want the good weather, we want kind of some of the bad. But again, just like in real life, if it's blowing a gale and our schedule says we're leaving today, it does not mean we are leaving today. And you wouldn't do that in the real world, and there's no reason to do that when you're in this sort of coaching and training mode. So, yeah, essentially that's sort of the game plan. And I don't know. Like I said, it's just been really rewarding. It's been a lot of fun. It seems like every single time I get on these boats, whether it's Mark and Steph or it's Joseph or, there's just been a great group of people that I've had the experience to, or had the pleasure to get to know. And yeah, I mean, it's fun just sharing these sort of trips and adventures with like-minded people who are looking for a little bit of adventure, that love sailing, that love the ocean, all that stuff. It's fantastic. And the fact that people want to learn and gain that sort of seamanship side of things and not just rely on YouTube videos or whatever to march forward into into their sailing life. It's cool. It's a really, really neat, fun thing. And like I said, I feel very privileged and lucky that people people are willing to take a chance on having me come out and do this sort of stuff. And the nice part is it's something I think I could do for quite some time. And that and the speaking stuff. I mean, the schedule is just crazy. Literally flying out to New York. We're going to do this trip 3 days. I fly back on Monday. We go down to Indianapolis. We do that show in Indianapolis on the 2nd. Tickets still available, by the way, just a few of them. And then the next one is a couple of weeks after that. And that's going to be a big trip going from Chesapeake Bay down south to a warmer climates. Absolute blast. So we're here. We've arrived at the old airport. So I got to shut this baby down and go check in and everything. But yeah, thank you all so very much for listening. And oh, shoot. Dang it. I'm jabbering away into this thing and I missed the long-term parking lot. Okay, I got to get down here. Oh, man. I might actually come back out so I don't have to carry my bag 80 million miles. Because, boy, this place is filled. Oh, there's a spot. And there's a spot. And there's a spot. And thankfully, I am way early. So I got plenty of time to kick back, relax, have a little breakfast, and hop on the plane. All right. Thank you all so very much for listening. Really, really appreciate it. Appreciate the huge amount of support. Like always, it is really humbling and amazing, and I can't thank you all enough. I'll report back in probably after the trip, and I'm bringing both of these little tiny microphones with me on this one, so hopefully we will be able to get just not my side of the story, but also the guy that I'm sailing with. It's going to be a lot of fun. Cannot wait. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. We are currently in the basement getting ready for a little trip to the Big Apple. More precisely, trip to Sandy Hook and then hopefully offshore with this slice of a window we have before this hurricane ends up whipping up the entire East Coast. It looks like the eye of the thing's going to be pretty far away. And it'll, it's not going to be for a few days. This trip is only going to be from Friday until Sunday. But let's take a look at this weather. What a sight. If you haven't seen, go on Windy and look at the forecast for early next week. We've essentially got 2 hurricanes out there. One that's going to smash right into South Carolina. Although I don't know if it's a hurricane yet. Let's pull up the old NOAA Hurricane Center. Man, it was bound to happen. It was such a quiet season for so long. And that always seems to be like, oh. So we've got Gabrielle, and we've got Humberto. And this other disturbance that's lying just north of the Dominican Republic. Now there's more of the progress. Yeah, geez. And Humberto is just a tropical storm, but for sure is going to turn into a hurricane within the next 4 or 5 days. But yeah, this little disturbance, I don't know if that one, it looks like it's going to form an eye though. And I'll tell you what, that is going to be an apocalyptic sight when it gets close, when the northeastern or northwestern edge of that hits the Gulf Stream. So you got strong nor'easterly winds going against that stream. It's going to be absolutely, I couldn't even imagine. I don't even want to imagine. My goodness. But that's what we're going to get into on today's show. A little bit of the old weather forecasting and hurricane season and all that sort of stuff. I'm lucky. Mighty Sparrow is pretty safe and sound, knock on wood, up there in Maine, hauled out of the water. It's pretty rare for Maine to get an actual hurricane hit. But boy, there is nothing ordinary about this, about any hurricane season. You never really quite know how it's going to go. But boy, look at that. Yeah. By Monday, this thing's going to be sitting right off the coast. And it is absolutely going to churn that Gulf Stream into, it's one of those things I couldn't even imagine. It would be so crazy to get caught out in that and looking at the wind gusts
Yeah, wind gusts up to 122 knots in Humberto by Monday. Jeez. And that's going to carry through all the way up. That one's going to be, I mean, they're going to have pretty strong gusty winds all the way up into the Gulf of Maine. 42 knot gusts come mid next week. I mean, that one is literally going to be shoving the entire eastern seaboard into the fall. Just the temperatures, it's just going to bring all this cold air down. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. You know, folks, it is not an easy thing to think about how, moving the boat and getting the boat from Maine all the way down to Florida. Obviously, there's a reason I don't do that at this time of year. I wait. And you would think that, waiting would be, the storms would get worse and worse. But boy, it is just a fascinating thing. The fact that we have this hurricane season where just for a couple of months every year, these massive systems come rolling out. Jeez, that thing is going to be huge. Oh, and the waves. Let's check the waves out. I'm just looking at windy. Oh, yeah. Look at this. How big are those waves way up there? What is that? 45 foot swell. Holy cow. 13-second period. Jeez. Yeah. It's going to be a bruiser. But thankfully, I fly out tomorrow and we are headed to, like I said, New York City. We're going to hop aboard. I think it's a Tazwell 43. And if all goes well, and the forecast does look pretty darn good, swell's not going to be an issue. Waves aren't going to be an issue. It's really just making sure we have some wind. That's probably going to be the biggest issue. But it looks like we're going to have kind of a nice southerly to get us going Friday evening into the night. And then that's going to turn to a northerly. So we could probably keep popping further and further offshore Saturday and then make our turnaround sometime around Saturday. And as Sunday rolls in, we get a nice little bit of nor'easter. And then it starts to die off, which is just about perfect because I got to fly back here on Monday. So that looks like it could be pretty fun. So what I'm going to do this evening is have a chat with Laz, with my client, and we're going to plot and plan between essentially doing day sailing stuff and then also working on the boat and some of the systems and things like that, or just trying to gun and go for a nice 2.5, 3-day offshore sail out and back where we can really grind through all the things of actually, what you need sailing wise and what you're going to do in that rotation and going through all the systems of sailing, if you will. It's very easy to be on the dock or in the boatyard and you're working on all these electronic systems, your windlass, all these other systems that take up your time to try and make sure they're running properly. And then there's the systems that you're utilizing when you're offshore and actually passage making, because those are the things like reefing the sails, changing the head sail, fitting the storm sails. You're going to still have those technical systems like your propane system or however you're cooking, all the water works, aka the plumbing on board any vessel, that's going to have to get utilized. And how does the boat perform as a comfort factor? Is it something that, when you're on a dock and the boat is level, everybody's got plenty of space, but then once you get underway, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I don't have this and I need a lee cloth here, or I need a lee board, or this is super uncomfortable and I thought I'd sleep in that cabin, but now I'm getting seasick. All these sort of things come into play, and you don't really find those out until you actually go offshore. And I don't know, I like doing both. I like to tinker with the boats and try and figure out all the systems and hook things up and sort out as much as I can. And at the same time, I also really enjoy sussing out a boat when you are out there on the water and you're dealing with the motion, you're dealing with the wind and the waves and whatever Mother Nature throws at you, and and you're just trying to make the boat as safe, as comfortable, and as efficient as possible. And you get to kind of mess around with all points of sail because this is an out and back. It's not a destination sail, so to speak, where we're going from like New York to Charleston. We get to mess around with all points of sail. And it's not so much about, oh, we're trying to get here. It's more about let's try and work out every bug that we possibly can in this little situation. And should be a lot of fun. I am really, really looking forward to this trip in particular. I'm excited to see the skyline of New York City, and I'm excited to sail under the Verrazano and past Sandy Hook and get out onto the big blue once again. It's been a little bit. Trying to think of when I arrived up in Rockland. I want to say that was August. Geez, when was that? August 15th, August 20th, something around there. So that was my last little sail. And I was pretty under the weather at that point. Geez. Ay, ay, ay. All right, we're going to take a quick pause. I got to do a little check to make sure this microphone level is okay. Be right back.